What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I'm here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to another episode of the REI Live Podcast. If you're a new listener, we just went through an entire rebrand, so we're very excited to we still love Alabama. We're still doing Alabama-based real estate, but we decided to kind of branch out a little bit and do more national stuff. We were already interviewing incredible guests all throughout the country, and today's no different, and it's no different from a lot of episodes that we have. We have the deal maker himself, Mr. Mark Evans. How's it going today, Mark?
Awesome, Brian. How you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I've got a lot. I've been following you for a really long time, probably for a couple of years, actually. Nice. And I'm sure that's I get that too. People like say that they've been following me for a long time. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, dude. That's cool. but you have a really big presence on social media. You've written books. Your newest book, The 10-Minute Business Owner, we're going to get to it here in a minute. I want to ask you, I just got done reading it. It's a very quick, easy read filled with incredible nuggets for anyone, any entrepreneur, really, not even necessarily real estate related. So we definitely want to dig into this, and I want to ask you some specific questions about some stuff that I found in here. But really just want you to kind of start off by telling everybody who you are, how you got into real estate, how you got into entrepreneurship, and just give people a good background history on yourself.
Yeah, so I come from a small town, Ohio, about 45 minutes east of Columbus, Ohio. Small town, 650 people, no cops, no stoplights. Grew up in, I have two sisters. My parents grew up in a trailer court till I was 10 years old, and my parents moved in the house actually that they still live in. Just country, small town living, and as an entrepreneur, I always wanted more. I always wanted to figure out. Some of my parents fight about money all the time, and I figured, hey, how not to get them to fight, make a bunch of money, and they don't have to fight. So kind of like my journey, I was young. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old, selling stuff at school. Couldn't wait for rain break because during rain season, during recess, you stay inside. So then I could barter and hustle and sell stuff in there. Just kind of always had that knack where, I was doing lemonade stands and all the stuff all kids do, right? So, holding yard sales and all that. But, just woke up one day and laying in bed at 17 years old thinking, I want to be rich. And again, being rich back then was way different than it is now. I just wanted to make $100,000 a year, Brian. That was it. Yeah. And I said, please, whatever I can do to figure that out. But what I did is what a lot of people do. We start reverse engineering the numbers. I didn't know anybody, first of all, that ever made $100,000 in my life, let alone how to get there. So it's like, okay, if I make $20 an hour, or $10 an hour, whatever, at 18 years old, you're thinking least, how many hours I got to work a week? And I started figuring out how many hours I need to trade for my time to get the money I wanted. And I wasn't afraid of that. A lot of people work very hard, but they're not getting the massive results they wanted. So they need or want. So to me, it was $100,000. I ultimately got to it. 2 days after high school, I bought a seamless gutter company on owner financing, just like I did in real estate, got started in real estate. And that company kind of started evolving because I was in the grind working construction, and everyone I was doing work for was in the real estate investment world. And again, these guys were not smarter than me. I think I always call real estate an equalizer of dummies.
Totally.
Especially when the market's good, everyone's smart. No doubt. What happened is, I saw these guys driving Porsches, smoking cigars, and I'm like, what do you do? And after 5 of them tell me the same exact thing, I was like, there might be something to this. So quickly within a couple months, I started figuring out I want to be a real estate investor and I need to learn from people.
Really interesting story. And I knew a lot of that story just by reading your book. I think that you spend the first couple of chapters talking about your story and how you kind of got into real estate, how you started entrepreneurship. Fascinating stuff. I want to go back to something you just said that's really interesting that I think there are a lot of people, and you mentioned this in your book too, there are a lot of people that today kind of glorify entrepreneurship, but 20, 30 years ago, I think we're probably about the same age, about 20 or 30 years ago, it was not glorified at all. It's like, if you're an entrepreneur, that just meant you're lazy. You didn't want to actually work. You wanted other people to do work for you. That's kind of what it meant. Yeah. You said something interesting a second ago that you're 17 years old and you want to be rich and you want to make a lot of money. And the first thing you did was you reversed engineered the numbers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty clear to anyone today. If you're an entrepreneur, obviously you need to reverse engineer the numbers. If you want to get to here, you need to do this much marketing, you need to talk to this many people, such and such. But at 17, not really knowing what you know today. Where did that come from? Well, how did you know that you needed to reverse engineer numbers like that to get to where you felt like you needed to be?
Yeah, I don't know if it came from anywhere. I mean, I think, again, just me being realistic with myself is like, people do it, by the way. People are reverse engineering their numbers all the time. It's called their paycheck, So what happens is they know what they're going to bring in, and they're just figuring out how many hours they got to work for that. They're more worried about how many days they get off a year as opposed to how much more they can make and give and do. I don't know where it came from ever, but like, again, in the construction mindset world, I grew up seeing my dad do construction his whole life, still does, maintenance and all that. So, you're always job process, you're always looking at the jobs, you're always getting budget timelines of budget of money and time and all that. So maybe it was just more of a instinct of like being around it my whole life. I don't know. Never really thought it was a big deal until you just said something. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, cause it is, more you say it now I'm thinking about, but like, that's kind of how I was thinking the whole time.
Yeah. And then, I talked to obviously a lot of entrepreneurs, and I personally believe that everyone is not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know where you kind of fall into that. When did you first know that this whole entrepreneurship, starting your own business, when did you first know that was something that was going to be your path instead of maybe school and the traditional route?
10 years old. I've never had a real job in my entire life. So if I don't kill it, I don't eat. So to me, I've never in my adult life have never, ever, ever thought about getting a job ever. It's never crossed my mind. It's like, quit being a wimp. You can do this. Gino Wickman from Traction, if you don't know him, but you guys should know it, follow his stuff, but he genuinely believes people are born as a real entrepreneur. A lot of times people say they're entrepreneurs, but what they really are implementers. Michael Gerber talks about this in E-Myth as well. We're just high level practitioners in our industry. So what has to happen is I think a lot of times Gino Wickman's talking about his life study for the rest of his life is going to be telling 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, you're not an entrepreneur, you're a wannabe, and that's cool, but know that this is who you really are and where you need to fit in. And this will take care of a lot of the depression problems that people have, right? Which is just a label in itself. You know what I mean?
Definitely. That's huge. And actually, it's interesting you're bringing all this up, the E-Myth, Traction, even cash flow quadrant. Sure. That's kind of where I want to go. I've got a lot of notes of where I want to go, took a lot of notes from the book. And we're going to end up like kind of touching on all these kinds of subjects. So it's really, really cool. Oh. The first thing I want to bring up, kind of digging into your book a little bit, is you say, make money, buy time, be free.
Yep.
I think as real estate investors, the number one reason why anyone would say in the beginning, hey, I want to get into real estate is because I want freedom, right?
Right.
But what ends up actually happening if they have any sort of success at all in real estate, and this is the vast majority of people I speak with, and I coach and I teach just like you do. So I see tons and tons of people. I lead a REIA group here locally. I see hundreds and hundreds of people get into real estate. They get into real estate for the most part for one reason: I want the freedom. Yep. And the people that end up having a little bit of success don't have freedom.
Sure.
And I would even say to an extent, I don't even have that much freedom just because of the lifestyle or the life that I have created, the business I have created. Talk about that for a second. The fact that people want freedom, and then because they think that real estate can get it for them, but they end up not getting that. They end up creating like this massive job for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think a lot of people have different meanings of what freedom is too, right? Like to me, I make decisions based off of my lifestyle of what I want and don't want. A lot of times people are saying, hey, I want the money or I don't want the money. To me, I'm more saying, hey, does that fit in my lifestyle? Mm-hmm. And am I willing? To me, $1 is just as exciting to make as $1 million. Like I respect money and I love to make money and help people get what they want. So I don't really... To me, freedom was like, I talked about this in the book, October 8th, 2005, my grandmother passed away, right? So she got 2 weeks, unexpected stage 4 cancer. Boom, she's dead. I was like, oh my God, I'm 27 years old. I'm like, this is what life has for me. And I work 17 hours. Like to me, I just love working. I love doing what I do. So, I think freedom is a very, I don't think people's really put their thumbprint on what freedom is to them. It's like, well, if I had $100,000, I could be free. Probably not.
Yeah.
That, and not only that, like $1 million, everyone always throws out $1 million. If you coach people, right, Brian? So what's your goal? Well, I want to make $1 million. Well, where does $1 million goal come from? First of all, this is other people's goals casted upon you to say, hey, I want to make $1 million. Why don't you want to make 100 million? Because your actions and your activities and your things will be way different than if you're trying to make $1 million. So freedom to me is really just being able to do what you want when you want with whoever you want.
I love that. And I say that all the time. I mean, that's kind of my mantra. But at the same time, freedom is probably not working 16, 18 hours a day. I felt a couple of years ago when I achieved working 100 hours in 1 week. That was an achievement. And when I did that, I wore that as a badge. And I had the honor of doing, who are you? You're not me. I worked 100 hours a week. But that is not really what I even got into real estate for. That's not even so you talked about a second ago, like freedom is just, decisions based on your lifestyle, like design. It's almost like you're saying, let's design our lifestyle first, and then let's try to fit our business in around that. Yeah,
right. I mean, do you work for the business or does the business work for you? Yeah. Right. I think a lot of people, and again, Gino Wickman talks about this often, is like, I think a lot of guys we talk to, Brian, say they're in business and they're the visionary, but what they really are is a high level implementer disguised as a visionary. Mm-hmm. And the best way to tell is if they can't leave their company for 3 months without it, going under, they're not a visionary. They might be a little bit, but you don't have, like, only 40-something% of companies have real visionaries. I'm talking real companies. So, you don't have to be a visionary. You might just be a high level implementer, which is cool. But I think where people get in trouble is they're not identifying who they are and where they want to go. And, then they're frustrated because they might watch me and say, wow, I want to be on the yacht with Mark. Well, but I worked 22 years to get there, and they're like in the game for 12 months. Yeah. And then they watch you, Brian, they're like, oh, I want to hang out with his kids like he does and blah, blah, blah on the weekdays. And great, you can do that. But what else are you going to do? Like, we actually do stuff that produces revenue to allow us that luxury.
Yeah, totally. No doubt about it. So the name of the book is The 10-Minute Business Owner. And just in a nutshell, let's sum it up. How can one become a 10 minute, we've heard of the 4-hour work week,
right?
The 10-minute business owner, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, because it is ridiculous, honestly. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, 10 minutes a day for me is me being on the phone listening to where the team's at, where they're going. I always talk about, hey, Mark, you're stuck on an island for the whole month. You have 10 minutes a day with a global phone. Who do you talk to? What do you talk about? And what are you deploying? Or what information do you need so you don't go and kill yourself? It'd be kind of crazy. So for me, the 10-minute business owner really, talks about the huddle style or whatever, like, the data points, the KPIs, not the drama. Keeps people very focused on task at hand. Instead of like, hey, Brian, you don't understand, man, I was really sick. My dad take my dog to the doctor, the vet, and blah, blah. It's like, I don't care how many calls did you get. That's all I care, data, not drama. How many calls went out? How many contracts went out? How many contracts came in? Blah, blah. Like, when you get to data, not only does it make your life easier and get your team more dialed in, but you're making everyone else's life easier too without them knowing it.
Totally. And that's actually where that was the first point I wrote, was data, not drama. Yeah. You talked about it. Just for the people that are brand new, we have over half the people that listen to us, just by my estimation, are really brand new. Maybe they've tipped their toe into real estate, dipped their toe into entrepreneurship, wanted to know just a little bit more. And you're talking maybe a little bit higher level right now, but let's talk about just the data. The data itself. Like, you want to be successful at any business, we've got to know the data. You mentioned KPIs, key performance indicators. What does that mean, and what should we be tracking? What are the numbers we should actually be looking at to be successful?
If you're talking beginners, I mean, just in general. Here's the problem is, guys, business is not hard at all. Okay. Overall, business is very simple. This picture, like the basketball people, like, LeBron James. Do you think he's spending more time learning how to dribble the ball or shoot the free throw or shoot the 3-point or man up? Like, people forget basketball is like 99% dribbling, and business is dribbling the ball. How many calls went out? How many calls came in? What is your product being improved upon? Are you providing a service and value to the marketplace? Do people even want it? the business is very basic. Where people get in trouble is they up in here, they start over complicating it just to make them feel like they're Superman and or Superwoman in the game.
How? What do people do? What do people do to from your experience?
Oh, that's not what Brian said. That's not what Mark said. Well, I want to try it this way. Oh, what about foreclosures? What about pre-foreclosures? What about sub-twos? It's all the same shit, just packaged up in a different package. So at the end of the day, all it matters is they made a phone call in, a phone call out, and they closed the deal. However they did it, whatever path they took, that's dribbling the ball for that strategy. It's all the same thing. If we're talking any other business too, I own a pretty big media company, and on the media company, if we don't build a list, we can't sell a list. Real estate, if we don't buy houses, we can't sell houses. So there's activities that have to take place to get the outcome you actually seek. If you want to lose weight, you don't sit on the couch, eat Doritos, and drink beer. You might enjoy it, but you don't do that if you're looking to lose weight and get in better health. So like the actions, again, it's all very simple to me. Like what frustrates me the most is people are trying to, like the 10-minute business owners, like it took me 22 years to discover what I'm sharing in there. And some of them might be like, oh, I've heard that before. It's not a matter about hearing it. It's a matter about hearing it and doing something with what you heard.
For sure. For sure. And so let's talk to that person for a second, because you say 10-minute business owner, and then you just qualified it that right out of the gate, you're not going to be a 10-minute business owner. It doesn't sound like you've got. So in the beginning, how, for me, I feel like it's more mindset than anything in the beginning,
100%.
but for you, or, from your estimation, you've worked with a ton of people, help them in their businesses. What do you see from the very beginning person, either interested in real estate or just interested in business, period? What's the number one mistake you see people making right off the bat, and how do you go in and correct those things?
Yeah, Brian, this is going to sound like I'm a total jerk. I hate working with beginners. I'm not saying that to be mean. It's not, I don't enjoy it. I get massive anxiety. I get stressed out. I'd rather invest that time in my team that actually can like make big shifts and moves in the company.
Yeah.
More company level. The people I best help and can serve are the people that have massive reach, that are kind of caught up in they're already doing it. I don't have to convince them why they should do it or can do it. I'm more helping them like get their mind rewrapped and deprogrammed from the past of like, you're only worth $1 million a year, showing you how you're worth 10 million or 100 million or whatever. So if I was a beginner though, the biggest thing is mindset by far. Again, I grew up poor. My parents, I think my mom makes $1,600 a month, and I'm not saying in a negative way, it's just the facts of what they do. So to me, to make money, like I make more money by accident daily than my parents make in a month. It's just crazy to me to think that it's even possible, right? So as a beginner, I had to get the right mindset, read, think, and grow rich. Like you said, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. These are different times too. Like 22 years ago, you actually had to go to the library. Now they could have this information and data at their fingertips. The problem is though, is once you get this information, now what are you going to do with it? And I think a lot of times people are afraid to fail. And to me, like, what does failure even mean? And number two, if you're not failing, in the grand scheme of things, you're failing massively. So people think they're living forever. They're very casual about everything. And that's honestly, and I'm not saying in a negative way, that's why I don't help a lot of beginning people, because it's you almost have to convince them why they should do it.
For sure. No, and I do help a lot of beginning people, and I know what you're talking about. So let's not talk about that guy. Let's talk about you then. Let's talk about what happened and how you actually started for a second, because you gave the background a little bit, but just coming from the background, it sounds like you have a very similar background to me. Grew up in a 2-room shack, outhouse, no indoor plumbing, just crazy. You wouldn't even think that, in the mid 80s, that there was no indoor plumbing in houses, but there was.
Yeah.
And just talk, how in the world did you get to where you are today? I know it was a process, but there's so many people today who start one way, or they start with really bad in a bad situation, that stay there.
Sure.
And they can't fight their way out. Like, I know you said you were laying in bed, how can you do this? How can you reverse engineer the numbers? How did you even get to the point to where you thought you even could do that?
I never thought I couldn't do it. They build these nice cars, they build these big planes, they build these big boats and houses for someone. Why can't it be me? So most people are saying, I always ask, why not me? Everyone's like, oh, I can't afford that. I was always asking the question, how can I afford it?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's all mindset. It's all repositioning. again, I personally don't reflect back on the past a whole lot, because honestly, I don't know if you have this, but I have like time lapse gaps. Like, I was just so busy doing the work. I don't remember what I had to do or not do. I just did what I did to get to where I want to go. So to me, it was more like, just do the work. So many people are watching all this amazing free content and doing absolutely nothing with it.
Totally.
And, so to me, it's like, you got to get off your butt and go do something. Even if it's wrong, it's right.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
You got to go do the work. You got to make 100 calls. Well, what if they say this? Make 100 calls. Well, what if they don't say this? Make 100 calls. Well, what's your plan? Make 100 calls. Like, just make 100 calls, get out of your own way, get 100 no's, you're going to get a yes.
Yeah.
It's like dating, right? Everyone's sitting around. If you sit at home and think about, oh man, I'm going to ask this girl out on a date, but you got to actually get your butt up. You got to clean yourself up. You got to go get the balls to go ask them out for a date. It's real simple. And if you don't do that, it doesn't work. But just like business, again, all this stuff is aligned with like business. To me, that's kind of how I've always seen it. It's like, I knew I'd never go to college. I knew, like, it wasn't even in my thoughts. I graduated with 1.7, 1.8. I hated school. Why do I need to take geometry when I don't care about, all I know is 100 times 100 is equals X, 10,000 kind of like, so to me, like, I'm not saying it's not important. It just wasn't important to me.
Right.
So I think, I've always been a little bit of a person like that. So,
and I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I feel like entrepreneurship is so glorified today, and we're living in great times, and everyone thinks they can do it, even if they had just a little bit of success. So I coach people who are brand new, never done a single deal. Nice. And the very first thing I like to tell them is almost exactly what you said, make 100 calls. I say, go drive around and write down 500 addresses of vacant or distressed houses. That's the first thing you do. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Half of them won't do it. They won't do it.
I would say half, you're being nice. I'd say 90%.
Well, these are people who have paid me.
Sure.
So they kind of feel like they have to, but half of them won't do it. And I'm just like, I put on events and I tell them, listen, this is the way it is. I'm kind of really, harsh with it as well. This is the way it is. If you want to be successful in this business, you have to work at it, and you have to work. Yeah. You have to talk to 5 brand new people every single day, all these sorts of things. And they won't do it. And they wonder why they're not successful. And so this goes back to what you're talking about, the data, not drama. I don't want to hear that. And I feel like you're saying this too. I don't want to hear that, you got tied up at work and this is going on and this is going on. I want to know the data. How many calls did you make? How many? And I feel like that is like the most important thing. I'm glad you put that in your book.
Yeah. Brian, on your side, when you're doing your coaching, are you doing one-on-one? Are you doing group, or what do you do?
Both. We do one-on-one, and then we have a big group setting actually tonight. Every other Monday night we do a group coaching. Yeah. And we get them all together and we kind of, look at successes, some failures. I do a little bit of teaching, but we all have the one-on-ones as well. And
no, I love it. I mean, the biggest thing for me, like I used to do a lot of one-on-ones with beginners. And the biggest thing is the calls, and anybody that's a beginner listening, especially paying Brian or anybody, is, every call would start off, hey man, you don't understand. I kind of didn't do my thing. Like, I'm not your doctor. I'm not there to listen to your problems. I'm there to help you get solutions.
Totally.
And if they're paying for an hour, you spend 58 minutes they're complaining about why they couldn't do something as opposed to why they need to. So that's kind of what burnt me out, because I really, I want to make an impact in the world, and it's really hard for me to do it one-on-one with a beginner. But God, if we can help get a reach and I can help someone make an impact to 100,000 people, I still make the impact. So it's like, don't want to do a onesie twosie and or go big. But that's awesome, man. I love it.
So let's talk about that. We talked about the beginner. Let's talk about the person that you may end up working with or you would want to work with. What does that person look like? And what's kind of the number one or two? I read about some of them in your book, but what are just one or two things that you see, mistakes that even say someone like me, who's maybe doing $1 million plus per year in volume, in transactional volume, what are kind of the biggest mistakes you see that person making?
Well, the biggest mistakes I see them making, one, they're not doing big enough business. That's always a big one.
What do you mean by that?
We're probably only running at 10% capacity. Even though we're busy, we're hustling, we're making more money we've ever made, we're probably only 10% at most. So, if you're making $1 million a year, you could probably be making $10 million a year with the same effort, same time, and all that. Again, asking the self, like, dude, there's people making $10 million a year right now, way, way dumber than us, way, way, way dumber. And, what are their infrastructures look like? What is their product? Because some of this stuff does have there is a product mismatch. So my media company will supersede my real estate investment company in 4 years, what took me 22 years to build, just because the market it's in, the space it's just massive, right? It's just such a scalable model. So my real estate company, though, has great tax benefits. I have a great team, amazing team. I'm really inactive. I spend 10 minutes a day in that business, if that. And, I'm really focused on that. So for me, people like that is, getting our head wrapped around, like, what's your infrastructure to look like? What do you really want the business to do for you? Are you aligned with what you want your business to do based off of your actions and your vision? Is the team on board with that? And really, getting clarity around all these pieces and just being a sounding board to help people know that there's so much more out there. And asking, and the truth is, we always say it, but do we really believe it? What got us to where we're at today, is it going to get us to where we want to go tomorrow? And oftentimes when we hit the $1 million mark, $2 million mark, or whatever, we think we're smarter than we are. And we're like, oh, I got this. I'm making more money than ever. I got a good life and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, okay, great. But and you're fighting this. I want to get to 10 million. I'm going to get to 10 million. But the problem is that what got you to where you're at is not going to get you to 10 million. It's just impossible. So, and I've seen it many times over with guys and gals.
So if it sounds to me like you're saying the number one mistake most people make that you're working with, the people that are doing bigger volume, is almost limiting belief that they can.
Yeah, we all have it, right?
How do we combat that?
Well, being aware of it.
Okay, so I'm aware of it, and I get in touch with Mark, the deal maker.
No, you got to be aware of it, and you got to be willing to do the work to get to the next step, right? It's kind of like if you're in the gym, you look like a pretty healthy guy. I'm not as healthy as I should be, but I remember when I used to be really healthy, is to look good and feel good was different than to have a six pack instead of abs. It was a different commitment level. So if I want the six pack abs, I'm going to put in a lot more work. I'm going to put in a lot more dedication. And I had to ask myself, am I cool with this looking okay and good and feeling good? Or do I want to look real good? And then next question is, why do I want to look so good? What is it for? Just to see if I could do it? Is it to impress someone? There's a lot of variables to all these things. So for me, it was really I want to build a company just, to certain levels, just to say, one, I could and I can. And number two, how can this company produce for me? And how can I change people's lives in the company? Because I care about every single team member on my companies. I think about waking up, how do I pay them more money?
So let's talk about that, how to pay them more money. And you talk about A-list type of players. You've said probably 4 or 5 times in this conversation that you have an amazing team. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that for a second, because the first point I wrote down, this is me kind of extracting stuff out of your book, how to become a 10-minute business owner. Number 1, data, not drama, is the first thing I wrote down. The second thing I wrote down was leveraging resources. Again, this is coming straight from you in your book. Delegating to A-list players.
Right.
So let's talk about this, because sure. It seems to me like one of the biggest challenges for someone who's doing some volume is letting go of control, because I am a total 100% control freak.
Yeah.
And if the number one way I can become a 10-minute business owner is to leverage resources and to delegate to A-level type of players, for someone specifically, maybe like me, that there might be listening to this podcast right now, what would you say to them? How can you help them let go?
Well, your goals aren't as big as your day-to-day task. You need bigger goals. I have, and I'm saying it in a nice way, because first of all, you're delegating and handing certain things off. Mm-hmm. Control freak syndrome, I used to have it. By the way, I lost an amazing person because of it. Yeah. I was a control freak. I always paid less, and I always gave her more to do. And I expected more. And when I realized that's literally that was a mule effect. I want magicians. I want people that get work done. And I'm like, how did they do that? How in the world did they get so much done in such little time? As opposed to oh, Brian, he's a mule. Give him more, give him more, give him more. You're either going to quit or die. There's no other way out. Mm-hmm. And, control freakism is that you're a mule to yourself, and you're a slave to your own self and your company. And I wouldn't even call it a company. I'd call it just a very, very high paying job with a lot of stress. So for me, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for, if it's kind of like tithing. I don't know if you guys tithe or whatever, back to churches, whatever, but it's like saying, I'm going to give 10% when I make $1 million. What's the best way to do that? start giving 10% when you make $1, start giving 10% when you make, you're not going to give 10% when you make 100, when you make $1 million, if you can't give 10% when you make 1,000. Just doesn't work. So how can I let go? What's the process of letting go? Let go of things that are not devastating to your organization. Very, very little actions and work is devastating to our companies. What could be devastating? Maybe the financials, the books, right? The bank account login information. And I still don't even think that is, because, if someone does that, they're going to prison if they steal your money. So, I mean, that's going to be devastating to them, as well as might have a hiccup in the company. But I'm more thinking, like, if I'm a control freak, which I was, is how to start letting go. The best way to let go is to get away. Get away. I mean, you've taken vacations and trips. Like, deals get closed. Things happen. Work gets done. The truth is, you're actually hurting yourself, your team, your company, and everyone around by being a control freak. No one will win long-term with that model.
So you say all this in your book. Everything you just got done saying is in your book. I highly recommend you guys go get it. We're going to link it up in the show notes. So don't feel like you got to break your neck to try to write anything down right now while you're driving. But we're going to link all this up in the show notes. But I just think it's really interesting. You say get away. And just by reading your book, it sounds to me like that was for you the big kind of the thing that led to this whole your business to really kind of take off, was you getting away for, I think, was a month in the beginning. Like, to me, and I read that, and I'm sure you felt what I'm feeling right now. I'm like, no way.
Exactly.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, I had a catastrophic moment, right? My grandmother got stage 4 cancer, and she died in front of me. So to me, like, the pain was more real than, just talking about wanting to get away. Keep in mind, I never was in a plane until I was 27 years old when I traveled for a month. So, I didn't come from a life of luxury where you travel and fly around and do all this stuff. So my girlfriend, then Dina, now my wife, she's like, hey, let's go to Miami for a month during the winter, December 31st, 2005. We went down there for a month. I had massive, my palms are sweating just thinking about it. Massive anxiety, stressed out, scared, devastated, excited, every emotion thing you could think of. So stressed. I was actually, this is New Year's Day. We were actually in bed at 9:30 at night because I mentally was just beat up by the time I got there. So, but I'm telling you, man, if you really want to, like, help yourself in your business, getting away is a very big thing.
Mm. Just mindset wise, like because you went through it, and you say your palms are sweating even right now. You went through all that. What, just looking back, obviously it wasn't as bad as you thought it might be, but looking back, there were obviously some big challenges by getting away right away. What were some of those challenges that you felt you had to overcome right away to make that a long-term success? Yeah,
well, it's way different now because technology was different. This is flip phone days. This isn't like Zoom technology and all these things. Like, I was in the real estate investment business, the chest-to-chest business back then. We didn't have websites. We didn't have videos. We didn't have, all these things. Like, you couldn't send a wire via online. Like, you couldn't do it. So I couldn't do online document signing or anything like that. So my biggest challenges when I left were actually, one, the team, right? I had to have a very clear vision of what my expectations and goals were for the team. So half the people leave, which is awesome and not so awesome, right? Because, you find out who your weak people are and your strong people are from that moment. And then, my biggest challenge was definitely buying and selling properties remotely,
right?
Through the title process. Like, it was very, very tough to get the title company to understand I'm not showing up. They're like, you have to. It's illegal if you don't. I'm like, show me where it's illegal. Yeah. So it was really fighting and combating that for many, many, many months.
Yeah. And then obviously that's not anything that's applicable today, because there's so many different things that we can do as far as like signing deeds from, doing closing paperwork from, many miles away. Yeah, it's crazy. I think right now again, the biggest thing would be systems and operations and processes and procedures and, hiring. I don't know how big your team is or isn't, but, a lot of people are remote. So, phone calls looped into a system. You see they made 100 calls. You got 12 contracts out, 2 in. Like, it's so much easier than it's ever been to be from afar. Yeah, definitely. And I don't really want to go down that road because that can be a very, very long road to talk about hiring and processes and systems. But obviously they're massively important. Mark talks about it in his book, but also traction. We've already mentioned it. The E-Myth is an incredible book. The cash flow quadrant, I'm a big believer in, just really everything that you're talking about right now is going from really the S, the self-employed person, the person who owns a job, going from that S to the B is the biggest leap. Going from where I own a job to where I am a true business owner, where I can get myself up out of the business for months at a time and it still make money and it still grows without me. Sure. I'm a big believer in that kind of stuff. And this is a lot of the stuff that you're preaching right now.
That's awesome.
Mark, is this just talking along that philosophy? Is this stuff that you felt like you learned on your own? Obviously you've been dropping names of a lot of books. But is this stuff that you just had to trial and error?
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone's like, how do you get A players? Hire a lot of bad people.
Yeah.
That's how you go. I mean, I don't know any other way. I think the first step, I talk about this in the book, first step is write a clear, defined, job description. That's step one. I used to hire like, hey, Brian, what's up, buddy? Yeah, have a beer. Okay. Yeah, you're hired. Let's go, man. Let's make $1 million tomorrow. And then 3 weeks later, I have to fire you, and then it becomes weird. But so I think clear job description, and then just having a structure or a process and procedure to hire. I used to hire very, very fast, literally like in a 2-minute conversation. Now it takes a little bit longer. But, my motto, everyone's like hire slow, fire fast. From my experience, most entrepreneurs were very good people. We care about a lot of people. We're very connected to like the emotional side of things. So like when I would hire someone, it takes me a long time to fire them, a long time. And I knew for 6 months I should have let the person go. And finally, when I pulled the trigger, they're happy and I'm happy and everyone wins. But it's just very taxing on us. So I think the key is just making sure you just got to hire a lot of people. I forget the real question though, but just talking about like the hiring A people, it's a process.
Yeah, definitely. And I also wrote down a note that in the beginning, you should focus on your strengths and do what your strengths are and then hire out your weaknesses. I think I hear a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, in my media company, I talk a lot about that. But like even now, like even in my real estate company, if you called me up with the best deal on High Street in downtown Columbus, Ohio, and you're like, hey, Mark, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that sounds awesome. Brian, I'm going to pass you over to my team. They're in the trenches every single day now.
Yeah.
So I don't answers to everything. And I think a lot of beginners think they need to know all the answers. The truth is you don't need to know many answers at all, except who to call and or who to go to. So I feel very confident in like, me just standing up and saying, hey, I don't know much, but I know a little. And I do know a lot about this piece. Everything else like can be handled by other people.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. Just talk about in the beginning though, for some people who may not feel like they have the budget to do something like that. Just for example, I've structured my company in a lot of ways to where it's incentivizing for people to go out there and do deals. My acquisitions manager gets paid per deal. Okay. I have realtors, I have a brokerage, and I have realtors that are obviously making money. We refer them business. They're making money when they close deals. So that's not really an out-of-pocket expense up front. It's an expense once money comes in, once revenue is generated. But talk about just like an administrative position. Talk about some other sales positions that may not be 100% commission like that. How does the person go and make that first hire when you're capped out or maxed out in capacity, but the revenue may not 100% be there?
Well, you're lying to yourself if that's the case, right? Like if you're capped out capacity and you can't make enough money to pay someone to help you, you're probably in the wrong profession, truthfully.
Wow.
So it's like, how am I capped out and I can't pay my bills? There's a problem there in itself. Either you're spending crazy and or you're just, delusional. And I'm saying that in a nice way because I used to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, ideally, if you can't hire an assistant and have an assistant do basics, task for you, it's gonna be really, really hard because that's like the person the easiest to hire, and it's the first hire that I think everyone should do, depending where you're at. If you're brand new and haven't done anything, that's the different story. You should do the work. But as you're starting to grow, like an assistant will save you so much time. And I'm looking for people that want a profession, not a job as well. Like I'm looking for professional assistants, not, I want these people at my kids' weddings and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking when I hire those. So I'm not thinking like, man, how do I get the most out of them over the next 30 days? And I'm just going to cut them loose and my life's going to be better and all that, even though I used to do that. I think, how do you do it? It's just like that assistant's the first hire by far.
That's awesome. So, and that leads into the kind of the last point, the really big point that spoke to me personally the most is I think it's the second to last chapter in the book, pay yourself.
Oh,
this is something that I've struggled with for years and years and years. And I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs, obviously, because you wrote about it, that struggle with this as well.
Yes. I mean, I struggled with it for many, many, many years. And what we're talking about is, say if your company makes $100,000 this year and you don't really pull a salary from it, even if it's a $500 a week, $500 a month, whatever, and yet you're constantly going in, dipping it in, like it's your personal piggy bank, really. And we disguise it as a company. And then the company suffers, you suffer. You're riding the financial and emotional roller coaster with all this. So what happens is, to create stabilization, I just kind of like woke up one day, someone's like, pay yourself $500 a month, just something, just get it on residual pay every month, $500 a month hits your account. And in my mind, goofy mind, I'm like, well, I'm stealing from my company. It needs it more than I do. Even though every month I'd go in there and pull money out to pay bills, which is crazy. I don't know why it sounds so weird, but like, it's what we do. So, once I set it up and started paying myself $1,000 a month, $2,000, like you really start growing into the role. And what's cool is actually, one, you have more personal money that you go loan to your business, and then your business pays you interest on top of the loan, which we do that sometimes. As you're growing, you will hit a point where you need more capital for growth. So all these things, as you're doing it, it changed my life. It's changed a lot of my buddies' lives that never did this. Yeah. And, I pay my wife gets a salary, I get a salary, and it just makes things a lot easier for a long time.
And I think it's huge. And it's not something I ever did until my wife quit her job, because we were living on her salary and just reinvesting back in the business. In the very beginning, we had to pay her a salary is how we set it up. Started paying her a salary so we could pay bills, right? But anytime anything extra came along, well, let's dip into this and dip into this. And it's a terrible, and I didn't really realize the magnitude of it until I read your book, until I read the last couple chapters in your book. And so I've started making a little bit more of a point to, hey, let's make this official instead of just, awesome. And it's an amazing thing. And you said it too, that it's an amazing thing that things just end up working out.
Yeah, always. Like
you end up just working harder, more efficiently, or whatever it is. And things end up always working out as far as the money goes when you start paying yourself. Yeah,
I mean, listen, like you're talking earlier about like people, that are, working very hard, but yet not having enough money to hire someone. The reason is maybe they have too much money in the bank account. A lot of times, especially in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, you're running your business from your bank account visual. You log in 23 times a day. You're like, yes. Or, oh my God, I got to get back to work. Like not all actions and all work is important. We all used to do it. We've all been there, right? Anybody that's in business that says I haven't done that, run, because they're lying. Everyone's done that. Yeah. So when you're in there and you see that account, like, the account is especially in real estate, as you know, Brian, it's a very massively lagging indicator. Because tomorrow we could have closings for $180,000 and there's only $100,000 in there. You think you're balling. And then literally tomorrow you're like, oh my God, I'm 80,000 short. I'm in trouble. So I think the key is gaining real, understanding how to read P&Ls, understanding why you're doing this, because then it will take a lot of the stress off that we're talking about, paying yourself first, because listen, we'll pay everyone else but ourselves. It's really weird because we're doing it for us. If we can't do it for us, how can we do it for others? No doubt. The more money I have, the more I can help the business. The more money I can have and help the business, the more the business will make, the more I can get more. Like, it's just kind of an interesting concept. And for some reason, it took me many years to figure that out.
But you're not alone, obviously.
Oh, no. Yeah. I'm definitely not alone.
Mark, I can't thank you enough. Again, I think your book is, even though it's a really quick read, it's very simple, but it's very powerful at the same time. And I love books like that because, Gino Wickman, Traction, it's a great book. It's about that thick, and it's a long, it's a laborious read, right? Sure. This is to the point, and it really it's written just in a way that just the everyday person can really understand and take action, which I think is the key to anything. You're trying to learn something. You've got to actually apply it for it to work. So thank you for this, guys. And we're going to link it up in the show notes. Check out the 10-Minute Business Owner, Mark Evans, the DM. Before you go, Mark, I got to ask you the question that everybody, you probably get this question a million times, but I gotta make it official in our podcast. The DM, the deal maker, where did that come from? I feel like I need like letters, initials after my name.
Exactly. It's interesting, things like I'm not this smart to come up with these things on my own, but there was a guy in Columbus, Ohio. His name was Mark Evans. So we're going to closings, and as you know, you have to sign off on all these things. I'm not Mark Evans. He was like 64 years old. It's not me. Like many, many documents. So, but what happens, you start getting a bad rap. It's like, yo, you're the Mark Evans. You're the Mark Evans. So I was like, no. And my buddy was like, dude, everything you touch, you're like a doctor of money or deal maker. You're always deal making something. And I was like, Mark Evans DM. And it just kind of stuck. And now everyone calls me the deal maker. They don't call me Mark anymore, which is wild. But it kind of sticks and it's kind of catchy. So it kind of works for what we do. I
definitely need to get some initials after my name.
Well, I think it's CF, right? Control freak.
Control freak. See, I don't want that. I don't want to go by that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. But the good news is you got a lot of room for recovery on the CF. So how you went from a CF to blah, blah, blah. It's awesome, man.
Awesome. Mark, thank you.
Brian.
I really do appreciate you. Appreciate your time. I know your time is very valuable. There's a lot of interesting stories, interesting anecdotes in your book, guys. Again, I highly recommend you go out and check this out. And all the net profits are going to charity as well. So it's definitely a good cause. So thank you again, Mark. Guys, we appreciate you so much for listening to another episode of the REI Live Podcast. We're going to see you next time.
Thanks, Brian.